A Science of Change, podcasting by Gilmore Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. Hi, Gil Crosby here, and I'm excited to bring you a two-part podcast using family of origin interview questions to interview my own father. So this is intended as a demo for how to do a family of origin interview. The primary thing that you have to keep in mind if you want to have this process have the intended effect is that you have to approach it with genuine interest in learning about another person's life, like an anthropologist. You are not in this process to work on your own issues openly or to in any way criticize or attempt to fix the people you are interviewing. If you are unable to control your own tendency to try to resolve or get some sort of satisfaction for old wounds, etc., through the conversation, then you're not going to be able to conduct a family of origin interview in the way it is intended. On the other hand, if you are able to set aside your own issues and genuinely approach family members with the intent of learning about their life through their own eyes, the paradox is that by doing that, by really listening in a way that only is respectful, no matter how deeply you may feel hurt by the individual about in past moments, if you can do that, then you very well will be shifting the relationship. You'll at least be experiencing the relationship in a way that you never have before, both of you. And you'll be exploring territory that you have probably never explored. So the large possibility of healing is there in this type of interaction. And we encourage these interactions with our students in our 2-year leadership development process, either within their own organizations where we're leading leadership development or through the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which first came into being in 1969 and became a graduate program in 1973 and is currently seeking accreditation to reopen after a few years since it had closed and ceased to operate. So it's an exciting time, and we will be using these same methods in a 1-year leadership development program. We have participants write an autobiography and sit down with a group of peers and read their autobiography and listen to the other autobiographies. It's a powerful process where people for one, realize that they're not the only one who went through some difficult times in their childhood and throughout life. They perhaps have carried a lot of shame about their own story. There's no need to be ashamed of your story. You were born into whatever you were born into. Ironically, people who had an easy time of it relatively, with a stable family, with stable income, they carry shame over having had it so easy. And so getting things out in the open, so to speak, between a group of peers, it's certainly a trust-building activity. But even more important is the connections that can be made between my early experiences and how I relate to authority now, how I relate to authority figures, comes in no small way out of my experience from the beginning of life. I immediately was in an environment with big people, adults, older siblings, who had a huge influence on everything that happened to me, as were you. And we get quickly attached to certain behaviors, emotions, and hold strong judgments about how people should behave in positions of authority, and so project those onto people, and also hold strong judgments about how we should behave in positions of authority. All of that comes from the very beginning. It starts to be formed immediately. And so that's why it's critical to leadership development. How you lead today is influenced by the habits you formed long ago. And the more clear you are about what those habits are, the more you can make choices now, instead of just living those habits as if it's just you. You can start to see that they're habits. And if you're adverse to being clear when you're unhappy, you can learn how to let people know when you're unhappy. If you're not in the practice of telling people when you're happy, you can learn how to tell people when you're happy. These are all really important aspects of any boss-subordinate relationship, and there's much more. So that's why we have people do family of origin work, is because it's relevant now. And the family of origin interview is optional when we do a one-year program, but many students do it. It's part of the required curriculum when we do a 2-year program. And so that's why I'm demoing it with you in these podcasts. So I hope you enjoy experiencing this real family of origin interview. Okay, 2 final pieces of information. One is that my father and I failed to get the podcast website to work to record our call. So we finally settled, as I have done once before, it worked well enough. We finally settled for him to just call me on the phone and me to have that on speaker and to record on my laptop that way. So his voice isn't as loud as mine, and I just ask the listener to bear with that, or of course you could choose to not bother with it if it is not satisfactory to you. But that is a small dilemma in these recordings. The second thing is much more important. We have professional therapists working with our second-year students. We give them all kinds of professional support. All the faculty are very experienced in using family of origin for learning. If you are listening to this and you are excited and motivated in whatever way and you want to do interviews, I highly recommend that you have a therapist as a coach on how to go about approaching your family in this way. And, if not, if you're pretty confident that you can stay objective and kind as you ask your questions, then, go ahead, feel free. If the intensity is more than that, then, certainly professional assistance is advised. And you can call me. I'll talk to you about it. And you also could try, and if it doesn't go the way you hoped, you could get help and then try again. So just please note that these issues can run really deep, really, really deep, as you may well know. And so you have to judge for yourself your capacity to stay differentiated and objective. If you have any doubts about that, get help and then proceed. Okay, I wish you all the best. And now we're going to go into the episode. Episode 1 and 2 will have this preamble. Take care. Okay, Gil Crosby with you again, and I am very pleased to have my father, Robert Crosby, with me, and my stepmother is also present, Patricia Norby Crosby. So this will primarily be a conversation between Dad and myself, maybe entirely between Dad and myself, but you might hear Patricia at times. And so I'm just going to be following the interview questions that Brenda Kerr created, Brenda Kerr Minno, that are available. If anyone wants these questions, I will gladly send you the information and also information about how to perform family of origin interviews so that you are really in the role of learning and not in the role of trying to fix the people that you're interviewing. So, Dad, here comes the first question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, who was around when you were children, say 3 to 4 years old?
Who was around? Of course, besides my own family, Dad, Mom, my brother, whose birthday was yesterday. He would have been 103.
So he was 8? He was 8 when you were born, so he was like 12 when you were...
He was 8, and then he'd be 7 for a while. Depends, when my birthday fell. Yeah.
And when you were 4, then this question is, he was around, he was going into adolescence.
I'm sorry?
He was becoming an adolescent when you were about 4.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. And he very much parented me. He was a very loving brother. For me, I grew up with 3 parents. An older brother who took care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents, who also, of course, did. And then just a block away, around the corner, were my grandparents, my dad's parents, William S. Crosby, who actually owned a farm a mile away from town, resided in town, in fact, was one of the first citizens of the town. There was quite a banquet held to honor him as having one of the first homes in this little town called Youngwood of 3,000 people when I was growing up. And then Grandma Sarah Maxwell was her maiden name, Scottish. And so my grandma and grandpa lived around the corner. They had a grape arbor. I loved to eat their Concord grapes. And Grandma made cookies and always had them there for me. And then a couple who lived there were very influential in my life. They were, he was called Reuben. I don't remember her name. But they had immigrated from Europe. And only later in life did I figure out, sure, they fled Hitler. They were Jewish. And they would show me their Yiddish newspaper. Reuben would. He took me in. He just nurtured me too. He was wonderful. I especially knew him. But it also told me a lot about my grandparents and their values. But anyway, then just a half a block away from where I lived, in fact, 3 houses, was an aunt and my favorite cousin and his older brother. And they had a big yard beside them between their house and the next house. And we would just play football there like you and I did in the backyard of East 1306 35th here in Spokane.
Wow.
It was about that size. So I went down there a lot. I spent a lot of time at Aunt Edith's. And then a block the other way was Aunt Violet and Uncle Arnold. I did mention Aunt Edith and Uncle Ernest. And then the other way, Aunt Violet, who was an older sister. Edith was a younger sister of my mother.
Okay,
Violet
so
was an older sister.
Of your mother.
Of my mother, yeah, it was my mother's side. My dad's brother, Harvey, lived across town. You could walk to everything in the town, so it wasn't like a long distance. And then his younger brother, Edwin, had taken over the farm by that time with his children. Yeah.
See, I'm already I'm amazed at how many family members lived in close proximity.
Oh yeah, I just grew up in family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of recreated that in Spokane now with all the siblings of mine that are still there and their offspring that are still there
But within walking distance like I was. As a little child, I could walk to this place.
That's amazing.
It was like everybody on the street knew you and looked out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Across the street, Gil, was a guy named, little kid growing up, older than me, named George Blanda.
Huh.
Who, for the listeners who don't know, became a great professional football player.
Right. One of the elders, one of the ones to stick around the longest in that game.
That's right. And he was doing quarterbacking in his 40s and kicking field goals. Yeah.
Well, you have already covered, okay, so here's a bunch of these questions. Earliest memories, memories of the neighborhood. How about early playmates?
Well, a primary playmate was my cousin Milton, who I didn't name him, but he was Aunt Edith's youngest son.
Mm-hmm.
And Milton and I were almost exactly the same age, just a couple months apart. And Milton was an interesting guy. Youngwood was a very, I was to learn later, bigoted town.
Mm-hmm.
We moved away from Youngwood because of the Depression. Dad lost his job. And so Dad kept trying to get work like the WPA, which paid $1 a day for work, and selling insurance and penny insurance, and he did everything he could. But they finally couldn't make the payments on their home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the payments were. The home was valued at $3,000, so I don't know what payments were back then. It couldn't have been much, but by our standards today.
Must have been a terrible crisis, though.
Yeah, he couldn't make it. Nobody could loan him the money. Everybody was tight. So he found a job at the Jones and Laughlin steel mills in Pittsburgh. And then Mom moved there when I was in third grade to be with him. And then I moved in with my grandparents around the corner. I had grandparents across town, too. They were special in my life. But the grandparents around the corner took me in, and that's why I got to know the Jewish family couple really well, because I was living with them for about half a year, finishing third grade, and my brother finishing, I think, 11th grade or 10th, one of the two. And then we moved to Pittsburgh, or a suburb called Wilkinsburg, and that began our life in Pittsburgh then.
Big changes.
It was a huge change. Well, one thing that was striking about it was I went back to Youngwood to visit, and I went to school with my cousin one day, And it was a hell on wheels school. It was one of those schools that you see in the movies where everything's chaos and the teachers can't control. And what I began to get was my cousins had grown up in a very bigoted community. And so when my cousin Milton, my favorite cousin, he came to Wilkinsburg once, and he made a disparaging remark about one of my friends who was black. And we got in a fist fight. And for years, we just didn't see each other. It was a bitter experience. But I realized that he had grown up in bigotry as well as his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Earl, his brother, late in life, I mean, I'm saying maybe 20 years ago, I said, how can you claim to be a Christian and be so bigoted? He said, it's easy. So he was a right-wing bigot and called himself a Christian.
That's sad.
And so but there were other cousins who stood up against that. And a cousin named Grace, she was every bit as, let's say, liberal as I was in terms of race relations or whatever. And so it didn't infect all my cousins in town. I had a lot of them. It certainly infected the one I was closest to, or affected the one I was closest to.
It came between you.
Yeah.
Well, look, back to maybe a different focus, but like going back to the earliest memories. Well, what are your earliest memories?
Earliest memories?
Yeah.
Well, sitting on the lawn with my dog, Queenie, Eskimo Spitz dog. We had a nice home. In fact, I visited it, I don't know, 10 years ago. I went back there, and Cousin Earl, we always loved each other, even though we were so different in our attitude towards race and attitude toward politics and everything. But he took me back to Youngwood, and I saw the home I grew up in, and I remembered the sidewalk and just remembered a lot of things about it. And on a prior visit, the people, I had gone in the house, and they had allowed me to go upstairs and see my room and everything.
That's nice.
So I got to see that place on that trip.
Do you think you had a favorite toy that stands out in your memory?
Well, the first thing I think of was a little wagon I pulled around.
Yeah, okay, nice.
Yeah. And there was a girl down the street, Gladys. She was my age. And she and I had interesting experiences together that I don't care to go into here.
But you...
At age 4 and 5 and 6.
Sure. You were attracted to her, I take it.
Well, somewhat.
How about early school memories? What were you? And this asks, what were your parents' attitude towards school?
Oh, my parents. Oh, they were determined. Both Gilmore and I would get an education. Dad was pulled out of school by his father to work on the farm after 8th grade. My dad loved school. He went to a schoolhouse, with all the grades in, a one-room schoolhouse called Kennedy School, and he would walk there every day. It was about a mile, and Dad always was good in math. In fact, in the church, when I was a teenager and then older even, my dad was always the treasurer, even though that there would be most of the adult men in church were college graduates. My dad, in the 8th grade, was the treasurer of the church, the Sunday school superintendent. He was quite a leader, but he was determined, as was my mother, who also didn't finish high school. She went to shorthand school and secretarial school, and both of them are just absolutely determined that Gilmore and I would have a college education. And in fact, my dad had a Hubmobile, but then he sold it and he loved to drive. But all the way from when my brother went to college, that's got to be 1939, till I graduated in 1950, they had no automobile. They couldn't afford it. They were putting us through school.
Wow.
Yeah.
I find myself, feeling overwhelmed with emotion and tearing up at various times during this conversation.
Wow.
Well, what did you do for fun? Family fun.
Family fun. Well, with my parents had parties at the house. I don't know how many, but I only remember them. And Dad had a microphone he bought that he had up on the second floor, and he attached to the radio. So people would come, and then he would go up there and take them out on a radio show. And he would mention their names, and they would be, "What's going on?" And then we sang. We just sang all the time. Mm-hmm. When we went to church, including when I was come home from college, and if my brother could be there. But all those years, we sat in the same pew at the church, and Dad sang bass, and Mother sang alto. Mother sang alto, and I sang tenor, and Gilmore sang the melody. And Gilmore was quite a musician, my brother. He was a great trombonist, a great guitarist, great pianist. Pianist not in the classical tradition, but he could play anything. You give him a tune, he could play it.
I didn't know that.
We sang a lot. We just sang at home a lot and at church.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you carried that on into our generation.
Yeah, in different ways, but I did.
Certainly in the car when we went to summer camp, we would sing in the car all the way to our destination, without necessarily singing the parts. Bass and
right.
Well, what chores did you have to do?
Chores. Well, as I got older, we moved to Pittsburgh. I can remember my mom and dad, especially my mom, would have me do the dishes, and I had silverware fever. Whenever silverware clanked together, I got chills. Now, my mother never believed that, nor my dad.
That's what was on you.
So you still had to do the dishes, even though you got fever?
Yeah, they were very mean. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I had silverware fever, but chores, I didn't do many yet.
I think you passed that on down through the generations also. Which of your parents was the disciplinarian?
Oh, brother. I suppose my dad, but I don't know that he was.
When were you in trouble?
I was so good, I was never in trouble. I'm trying to think of when I was in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I was in trouble when I was accused of stealing money when I had a job at a pharmacy. I was accused of stealing the change. Yeah, and so my dad went and defended me.
Yeah, I imagine he would.
It's the worst moment of my life in memory. because I really had stolen the money.
Oh, okay.
But my dad didn't know that.
Uh-huh.
And God, I hated it.
Yeah.
But I never told him.
Huh. Have you ever told anybody?
Well, I'm sure I've told Patricia about
Okay.
it.
It's the first time I've heard this story.
Yeah.
Well, who listened to your feelings when you were sad, happy, angry, etc.?
Who was into them?
Who listened to them? That's what the question says.
Either my mom or dad.
Mm-hmm. Both of them?
Oh, yeah.
Nice. What are some early memories of your relationship with your brother?
My brother. Well, let me give you one of my dad first, because I happened to think of it when you asked about that last question.
Uh-huh.
I worked to go to college, and he was supporting me, and so I worked on construction and digging trenches for new houses or homes or buildings, and run into jackhammer. Actually, it ran me, but anyway. And after a couple summers, Melvin Moody at Camp Wanakee came to visit me at Otterbein, and I was pretty renowned by then as somebody who could lead singing, and I was nicknamed Bing, so I was fairly popular in that area, and so he came and he offered me a job at Camp Wanakee as at that time Wanakee was what we call centralized. A lot of activities happened with the whole camp. Later, we led the nation in decentralization, having small groups with shelters out in the woods and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But so he offered me this job at camp, but it paid considerably less than the construction job. So I remember approaching my dad. I can see him sitting at his desk in the living room. Or was it a chair? Anyway, I can see my dad sitting there. And I'm saying, Dad, I got this opportunity to go to camp, be a song leader and recreation leader, and at a camp called Camp Wanakee. And but it doesn't pay as much, which meant, of course, that he would have to come up with more money. My steelworking dad, who couldn't afford a car. And, the statement he made to me was something like, he asked me a question. He says, will this help your career? I said, I think it will, Dad. He said, and you got to do that. Yeah. And, of course, later, I was in charge of camping in the national staff of the Methodist Church. That would have never happened if my dad would have said no. So that was a poignant moment in my memory of him.
Yeah, you've got me crying again.
But you had asked about my brother?
Yeah. Early memories of your relationship with your brother.
They're vague in some ways. I just remember that he was always around to take care of me. I'm thinking in Youngwood now, because once we got to Wilkinsburg, he only had a year or two before he was off to college.
Mm-hmm.
And he was caught up in high school, his chemistry, all those courses that he became an expert in. And I don't remember as much about him in Wilkinsburg, but as a little boy, it was just a vague memory of being nurtured all the time.
I bet you played catch and things like that.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure we did. We also played on the corner. We had a game called Kick the Stick.
Mm-hmm.
Lean it up against the curb. You'd kick the stick, and then the people who were, think about a baseball field, the pitcher, they were in all those positions. they would have to get the stick and get it to first base before you did, or you had a single.
Okay, nice.
It was called kick the stick.
Nice.
And played in that. The older boys played as well as the younger kids. And of course, they always helped us get on base and things.
Mm-hmm. It's another nice family tradition.
Yeah, which I continued very much with you kids and the kids around the neighborhood, making sure the little kids succeeded.
Nice. The next question here is favorite ways to get into trouble.
Wow. I don't know what I would define as trouble as a little kid.
Well, you mentioned the situation where you were sneaking some coins out of the till, but
I was sneaking some what?
Some money out of the till, you said.
Well, that was as a high school student.
Sure.
Working at a store, yeah.
Did you get into trouble in other ways in high school?
No, I really didn't, that I can think of. No, I had a fine male quartet in high school with an African-American bass. And,
Dad, some of your trouble's been good trouble, like when you tried to take your African-American friend to the diner.
Right, and they refused to serve us. But I don't see that as getting into trouble. But I realized it really was getting into trouble. But the kind of trouble that I wanted to get in, I've kept getting in all my life. So
right, like fighting with your cousin, also is another example of that.
Right.
Well, who amongst the parents gave permission to go anywhere?
Wow. My parents were interesting. When I think of going anywhere, it's having friends who were African American primarily, Catholic, because my parents were Protestants, and the way my parents honored these friends, whether it was my high school quartet bass or Carmen Bonacci, an Italian Roman Catholic who I liked a lot, went to school with, walked to school with every day and back because it was just along the way. Or the little black girl that walked with me to school every day when I was younger than, and lived in a different place near what was called the Black District. I don't know. They were just always supporting. What was the question?
Who gave permission for you to go anywhere?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know, but it wasn't both parents talking it over and deciding. I went downtown a lot, 5 miles, to see the Stanley Theater, where Tommy Dorsey, Frank Sinatra, Harry James, Gene Krupa, you name them, and they were there with the live stage shows. And my cousin and I, or my brother and I would go there, but then when he wasn't around, my cousin and I would go down there, and we weren't that old, 7th, 8th grade. Bumped into Frank Sinatra once.
Exciting.
Literally, yeah.
It must have been exciting.
Yeah, no, my cousin bumped into him and fell over. So Tommy Dorsey and Frank Sinatra picked him up and signed autographs for us.
Nice. Well, these next few questions, I'm not sure what you're going to have to say about them, but one is, what did you have to do to be on Mom and Dad's good list?
Well, I suppose go to church regularly, but I always did it. I never thought of it that way. They were really proud of me around my Sunday school attendance, which I remember one Sunday I was sick, and Mom stayed home with me. And then when she went into the bedroom later, I wasn't there. I'd gotten up, got dressed, and went off because I didn't want to end my streak of several years of being not missing Sunday school.
You little rebel.
That's right.
In your mom, dad, your older brother, and you, it's not like there was a black sheep or anything. So,
well, I thought of myself as a black sheep for a while because.
When was that?
Well, I'm trying to think of how I thought of myself that way. Well, as I became more theological liberal, remember my parents were Protestant Christians. In the 20s, that meant a subject we haven't brought up yet, but it meant belonging to the fine Christian group started in the north in Indiana, the Ku Klux Klan. They had a cross as their symbol, and
they went by a different name, right?
What?
Didn't they go by a different name?
Ku Klux Klan they went by.
Okay, I thought they went by like the. Anyway, I think there was a different, more like Christian name that they also went by. But anyway, keep going.
Well, I don't know about that, but the KKK was a Christian. It was a Christian group.
I understand that that's how they saw themselves.
Yeah. And so my parents, in the 20s, the same phenomena that was happening in Germany, incidentally, which has helped me understand Germans a lot in World War II. But it was Christians, it was Catholics and Protestants that elected the Nazis in 1932. So in the 20s, the Nazis were rising as a Christian group. Hitler was seen as someone who was favored by God, and a lot of the same stuff as you have with Trump today. In fact, it's almost a duplication of, and Christians supported that rise. And in the United States, the KKK spread across the United States, including here to Washington State, where I'm sitting now. And it was a Protestant movement because it was the fear in the North was that the Catholics were going to take over America. That was a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
The Pope was buying up land to take over America. So the pastor, Meade Snyder, who baptized me, and my grandfather, who I haven't talked about much, but who wrote a book called 20 Pathways Leading to Judgment. He was considered to be the most pious of all.
Mm-hmm.
He and my pastor started the chapter of the KKK in Youngwood. And so my parents, of course, joined. I mean, it was my mother's father. And but it ended in about 9 months. And it's a whole story itself, because their belonging to that helped me understand the naivete that was happening in Germany, Italy. In a way, you can make the same case for Japan, though differently.
And for the United States today.
Exactly. And if people don't know that history, then as we say, we're bound to repeat it. I hope not intensely, but we may have to.
I hear you. We are already, I think.
Well, the problem is, in World War II, we were the ones that were strong enough to defeat Nazism, to really overturn it. The Russians were too, but without us, I don't think it would have happened. The problem now is if we become the world's greatest fascist state with our military, who will stop us?
Yes, that would be a nightmare.
Yes.
So you became a black sheep in your own head when you started questioning things like theology.
Oh, absolutely. And my own head, once I went to college, the college my parents wanted me to go to, there was a church college, but what they didn't realize was that the professors were highly educated. But you know, my parents went along with it. My dad started to read the books I was reading. There was one book called The Life of Jesus by a man named Goodspeed. And I was telling Dad about it, and so he wanted it and he read it. Well, it began with Jesus was born in Nazareth. What? Not in Bethlehem? In other words, he was reading books that I was being impacted with.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Pope John, the great Pope who liberalized the Catholic Church to whatever degree it could happen at that time, when he started ecumenical Bible study and invited Protestants to join Catholics, my dad and my brother lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania then, but the two of them both were the first people in that Catholic Church to study the Bible with Catholics. So they just opened up like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Dad and Mom asked me never to tell anybody that they were a member of the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
But the learnings from that, of the naivete of people, which, as you highlighted, and I'm saying also, exists so much today in the United States, the learnings about that naivete have been profound for me in my life. And I think I've been able to share it with my own children and perhaps, and some grandchildren. I don't know if I could say all grandchildren. I don't know for sure.
I think your mom and dad would forgive you for revealing that information the way that you're revealing it.
For anything.
Yeah.
That's probably true. Probably pretty much for anything. But who lined up with who in family squabbles?
That doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. I understand. I mean, it could in many families make sense, but
yeah.
Were you? And so the next one is, who were you always on opposite sides from?
Nobody.
Yeah, I think your family was pretty unique in that. So let's see. Is there any discomfort in talking about these things?
I'm not aware of it, except bringing up the KKK thing, because
sure.
It can be so misunderstood. You know, I told someone a week or so ago, and they were just shocked, you know, but they had no understanding of what it meant to join the KKK in the 1920s.
Right.
Had no understanding of it. And then in the North,
mm-hmm.
Washington State, they had their own stereotype of the KKK, which is close enough to the truth that I can understand that stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different phenomena, and the naivete that we were swept up in America, as well as I mentioned in Germany, Italy, etc. That naivete on the part of especially Christians, Catholic and Protestants in Europe, is just unknown to most people today.
Sure. So it's the discomfort is fearing being misunderstood and having people get reactive and so on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And to be reactive to my parents and not understanding
mm-hmm.
The radical transformation in their lives once they discovered what they had been part of. And, my dad and mother fought for civil rights. When I brought Max Baylor home from Otterbein, and he was a student from Sierra Leone, Max came home, and we lived in 5 rooms. There were 5 rooms in our apartment. The front 2 were owned by or rented by a very bigoted white woman, and we shared the bath in the middle. And was a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchen that we rented. Well, when we brought Max home, she was furious, the white woman in the front. And I'll never forget my mother seeing her down at the end of the hall by the front door with her hands on her hips saying, Max can come here anytime he wants, to that woman. And now I got the tears.
Me too.
I'll tell you, they just forthrightly stood for justice against McCarthyism. Dad faced down McCarthyism. It wasn't just something happening in Washington, D.C. It was happening right at our church. People were accusing our pastor of being communist. And so my dad and mother, and especially my dad, when I dismantled a John Birch Society chapter in the 60s in Wausau, Wisconsin, boy, my dad was supporting me. I mean, it's just, they made a remarkable transformation, and I'm really forever proud of them for that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about Max Baylor. If I could have a word with my mom, just one word, it would be, Mom, Max Baylor returned to Sierra Leone, and when he died, according to the newspapers, 100,000 people mourned his death. He was, you remember when we were doing work in, where was it Willow went to school? Wilmington or no? In Delaware. Where did Willow go to college?
Rutgers in New Jersey.
In New Jersey. We went into church there.
Mm-hmm.
And the church had a lot of African Americans in it with colorful costumes. And I turned around at a certain time. I guess there was a greeting time or something. And I saw these two women behind me, black women in beautiful costumes. And I said, where are you from? Well, Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, I said. Oh, I knew Max Baylor. They said, you knew Max Baylor? And Max Baylor became a really famous educator in Sierra Leone. And that's the man that my mother defended.
You've got me in tears again, Dad. Well, this next question, we're almost done, by the way, with section 1. And I think we're going to turn this into a 2-section interview. But the next question is, and you just sort of answered it, were there any family mottos? And certainly fighting injustice was an unspoken motto, at least. But well, anyway, answer this how you would answer it. Any family mottos or rules frequently repeated by your parents?
Well, I don't know that they were repeated. They were done. I can think of the way the family was early towards Catholics. The KKK, as I said, was reconstituted in the north in Indiana and across the north to fight Catholicism, not really African Americans. There weren't any African Americans. Anyway, it was one day, this is when I was a child in Youngwood at home that my parents bought and loved and lost. But one day, her younger sister, Aunt Beatrice, showed up at the door with, we called him Hun, H-U-N or H-O-N. But anyway, we called him that, and we liked him a lot. But they showed up at the door, and my Aunt B said to my mother and Dad, we want to get married. Will you stand for us at the courthouse? Hun was a Catholic. My parents immediately said yes. And the whole family was opposed to the marriage. So, they just sent, with their behavior, messages all the time. I'm not sure there are any mottos or anything like that. There was a picture in the living room of an angel watching a little boy on a cliff to protect him. And I suppose that was a motto that I would be taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Who was your first girlfriend?
Well, I was in love in first grade with Nancy Buskey. And I bought her. I remember I got to get 5-cent early temple ring. Nancy Buskey. Yeah.
Nice.
Third grade, it was Vera Moore. Fourth grade, it was Beverly Durgan.
And that was all still in Youngwood?
Well, Beverly was in fourth grade, so that would have been in Wilkinsburg.
Okay.
But he lived right next door to us, and we went to school all the time together, and we were usually late for school. And that teacher was about a 5-foot-tall teacher, or smaller. She was marvelous the way she treated us. But yeah, I was in love with all of them. I've fallen in love a lot in my life, and so, never any more than I have with this woman seated beside me right now 45 years ago.
Nice. Well, look, I'm loving this, and that's really sort of section 1. And okay. Section 2 could take just as long.
Well, let's pause now. I need to pause anyway. I need a break.
Would like 10 minutes be enough, or would you prefer to do section 2 another day?
Oh, let's keep going.
Okay.
I'll be back.
Okay, cool. Hey, I appreciate you listening. This, again, is Gil Crosby. And I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. It's many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Most the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day and invite you to.